I'm going to go ahead and read the bios, and then I'm going to give a short little timeline of the play that we're about to experience via the Zoomiverse right now. So important people to know. We got Carleton Bluford, who is an actor, singer, and writer from North Ogden, Utah, one of our very own. Regional theater credits include creating roles in Plan B Theater's Wallace, which is the play we're about to check out right now, The Third Crossing, A Version of Events, and One Big Union, as well as productions at the Pioneer Theater Company, Salt Lake Acting Company, Hale Center, Theatre-Orem, and West Valley, Moonlght Amphitheatre in San Diego, and Musical Theater West in Long Beach. So a lot of roots in supporting the Utah community. So thank you so much for sharing your talent with us, Carleton. And he has sung with Luther Vandross, what? Natalie Cole, Kristin Chenoweth, and was invited to sing for the mayor of Long Beach. He is the first African-American playwright to have a world premiere staged in Utah, Mama at Plan B Theater, where his new play, The Cleanup Project, premieres in February of 2022, which is coming up. So go ahead and mark your calendars on that one. We'll get more details about that, I'm sure, during the Q&A. And he has also written the screenplay Cowboy, which he is working on getting produced. And he has worked extensively in Utah, and recently booked his first co-starring role in LA as Seth on The Conners. So big ups to Carleton. It's such a huge joy and pleasure to have you here with us this evening. Our playwright, the magnificent Jenifer Nii. It's such a joy to have you back here working with the Center for the Book, Jenifer. She's a Salt Lake City-based playwright and is the first Asian American playwright to have a world premiere staged in Utah. This very play that we're about to do at Plan B Theater. It's a second, like a lot of world premieres happening from Plan B Theater. I see that good work. She has also premiered her plays, The Audacity, The Weird Play, Kingdom of Heaven, Ruff, with an exclamation point, The Scarlet Letter, and Suffrage at Plan B, and was one of the 12 contributors of Indivisible. We featured Suffrage for Thrive 125, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. One of the most compelling portrayals of polygamous women in Utah that I have seen. So thank you so much for your amazing work, Jenifer. She's received grants, one of the 10 inaugural Writers Alliance grants from the Dramatists Guild Foundation for The Weird Play, and is a 2-time nominee for the Harold and Mimi Steinberg American Theater Critics Association New Play Award for Best Play Produced Outside of New York, The Scarlet Letters, and Suffrage. And Ruff will be seen in Birmingham's Children's Theater in Alabama this season. So if you're cruising by Alabama, it might just be a thing to check out. And then last but not least, we have Jerry Rapier, who has been the artistic director of Plan B Theater Company since 2000, which is making this like the 21st year of like being in that position, and he's been holding it down amazingly. He's directed more than 30 productions for the company, including 5 of Jenifer's play, including the original production of this piece. So we're really happy to return to this work, and Carleton's play Mama. Jerry is a recipient of the Salt Lake City Mayor's Artist Award in the Performing Arts, and is the first person of color ever to lead a professional arts organization in Utah. Boom. Just had to let you know who you were in the room with. These folks are pretty cool. I did miss one part that I have to say about this program that makes it special. We're a part of Welcoming Week, which is this national campaign focused on recognizing the contributions, the history, and the amazing work of new Americans, which is a term that they're using to include both refugees and immigrants. And this play is featuring that conversation of new American, as you'll see with Wallace, and has been written by Jenifer Nii and is being directed by Jerry Rapier. And we're excited to feature this work as a part of that. The last little bit of context I need to give you before we go ahead and just let you enjoy this beautiful art is that Fire dramatizes Thurman's time in SLC from his birth in 1902 until he leaves for USC in California in 1922, then to NYC in 1925. Fire, the magazine, was published a year later. The play then returns to SLC in 1929, where Thurman works on Sultan Smith, and concludes with him at City Hospital in New York just before his untimely death in 1934. That's what we're about to jump into here. Right before I hand it off to Carleton, I'm gonna let y'all know we do have a Q&A in here. At any point, feel free to drop questions. We're gonna have a Q&A afterwards, so go ahead and drop those. You wanna put your questions into Q&A. If you put it in the chat, I'll try to notice it, but it might get lost, so, okay? Just be aware of that. And the chat, feel free to say what's up, to react, to give your thoughts as stuff is going on. And we're so excited for this performance. Carleton, I think it's up to you. Go ahead and take it away.
Fire! Fire's gonna burn my soul. Soldiers of Harlem marching in time to the rhythm of jazz towards century 20. Gonna change the way of the world and make it sing. Gonna put our shoulders to the mighty concrete cabins and lift them dancing high into the sky. Gonna make them see Harlem. Mad medley of a universe lit to burn. See Harlem. See the rise of nigga heaven. Soldier Langston. Soldier County. Soldier Wallace Thurman. The army of Harlem. Movers of the movement pressing with paint and song and the power of the almighty word. Oh, fire! Yes, sir. It was a world on wheels, and we were all looking, wanting, everybody moving everywhere fast. In 1902, I'm a boy in the Salt Lake City of Saints, where there's angels on the corner jostling for space, and a devil on every inbound train. Oh, we were running all right, chasing after visions in the sky like it was in our blood, for it was, my brother. We got our blood from Utah. 50 years passed, the Mormons lugged their wagon across half the continent in search of a spot where they could get on with their religious peculiarities, unmolested by their brethren in God, who insisted that they practice other religious peculiarities. There were 2 Negroes in that first overland trek, a man and a wife. He had only one, the Mormon canon prohibiting more. He was a servant to Brigham Young, and she, who knows? Ma Jack took us back whenever my mama abuela ran aground, which was pretty well all the time, from Salt Lake to Boise and Chicago and Omaha and back again. Abuela and me be bumping and careening after her dreams. And the men, always the men. Wally boy, she'd say, this one's gonna work out fine. Ma Jack always did take us back. You know, maybe mothers can't help but shelter their own, no matter how old nor foolish. Maybe it was something else. But eventually, it just got to be where we laid root. 3 of us in Salt Lake City, Black pioneers in a strange white land. On sunny days when it was warm, I'd take my books and schoolwork out to the front porch. There'd be other kids out, herds of them, because they were Mormons and procreating was of topmost priority. The houses were close, so I could hear them playing 4 and 5 away, jumping hedges and double-dogged daring. And they were about my age. Now, I knew because I started school and had memorized the backs of their heads. I stared at them so much. They ran past the porch steps where I was sitting, and from the laughing, I should have known that the one who smiled and waved at me was on a dare. Only children laugh like that. And it was seconds before his ma whispered out to him, "We don't play with those. Young man, come inside now." Ma Jack, she said to me, "Wallace Henry Thurman, God bless you with more brains than your ma and me and all them kids put together. Now, he might have made you sickly, but you got power o' mind. Now, don't you never let no one, dark nor light, tell you what you can't nor aren't. You hear me? You get out there and do." She didn't elaborate, and I hadn't the slightest notion of the oddness she was talking about, but my little mind did what it could, and I turned to where I'd come to turn for what I knew. Books and Ma Jack. My life. among the few who didn't seem to mind whether I was feeble, or did not worship the Lord, or turned up Negro. Thumb through any book, and there'd be someone opening a door, offering a life. I could be anyone, anywhere. London, Constantinople, a sailor, or the Queen of Sheba. And that was something, I tell you, for a growing boy like me, to get away. To the University of Southern California, a world away from the University of Utah, where I spent 2 lunatic years as a pre-med student. Why I thought I'd make any kind of doctor, except perhaps physician, heal thyself. So, to California, a new scene, and hopes as big and as bright as the desert sky. The verdant USC campus was teeming with young people, the continuum of colored intelligentsia. And there, clustered tightly together under the noonday sun, were gathered what appeared to be actual bona fide Negro academics. Huzzah! Yes, I thought, yes indeed. So I marched, chin up, high stepping, up to my brothers and sisters in color. This was going to be the day. But no. All that talk of what it is to be Afro-American. What must the Negro do to prove his worth? It was enough to drive a fella to drink. Furthermore, they said, what to do with that Thurman? Oh, he's one of us, but must he be so obviously one? You can't distinguish him from a shadow at night. He's so black. Because it was becoming all right to be black, just not too. So I did what angry submersives did. I started a magazine. Outlet. The title is quite subtle. NEPA. I was going to get things going in California. I was going to cut right through the endless, useless talking and light that place on fire. We were going to do and let that speak for us. I made it 6 months. In California. I watched Manhattan grow through the window. It had taken more than 10 days to arrive from California, and I thought I'd go mad before we arrived. Jen helped, but just a little. As the train lumbered near the city, I felt my chest tighten, the way it rose up. I had to strain to see the heights, my cheek pressed against the warmth of the glass as the skyscrapers reached out and around until the sky itself yielded and faded, and there were only the trunks of a vast mortar forest. Through the glass, I could hear it too. The rumble of the rails, the rushing traffic, the muffled blend of shouts and music. Inside, a hum spread through the train car. Excitement whispered high and low from men and women and youngsters also on their maiden voyage to the city of cities. The smell washed over me in waves, thick and pungent. I stood paralyzed as people streamed past me. I breathed it in, my lungs filling with so much that was new, New York City. I made my way north, and the revelation. Never had I felt so much at home. In Harlem, poets and bootleggers live side by side. Preacher and physician, undertaker and dentist, number banker and postal clerk, Pullman porter and real estate shark are all aristocrats. Here on 7th Avenue, a peroxide blonde with yellow face and brown arms dreams up a new Charleston step, while schoolboys strike a mean pose in the corner store. All of them waiting for the magic. 7th Avenue at night, an electric lit line of brilliance and motion, smoke and promises, a dream city with wide awake realities. It wasn't until I arrived that Labor Day 1925 that I finally understood what Brother Brigham meant when he let loose his cry into the thin cracking air, "This is the place!" Hey, I like that crazy dude. Langston, my God, Langston Hughes, come hither, man. Have you seen this? This week's reading, Plato, Schopenhauer, Stendhal, Keats, too fast, I know. I ask you this though, where are our Dickensians, our Shelleys, our Tolstoys? You should write a book. No, don't you see, Langston, this This is what's possible. Oh, Harlem, 267 West, 136th Street. That's where it was going on, man. We emblazoned the walls in red and black. Richard Bruce Nugent added his chocolatey phallic murals and we were set. Here was Niggerati Manor, named for we, the nigger literati. And what we lacked in money, Lord, did any of us have any money? We made up for in sheer abandon, the freedom to live an unabashedly bohemian, unbound life. We drank, smoked, fornicated, argued, and dreamed. We wrote, the better of us wrote better, all of us clutching with varying degrees of enthusiasm, the banner of the new Negro. Entrez-vous. Come, come. Don't know what you like to drink? Oh, we've got wine, of course, cheap but red enough. And gin and corn and rye liquor and who knows what all back there. Enough for at least a half an hour. Off with your coats and hats. Trousers are optional. I come down against them as a rule, but to each her own. All are welcome here at Niggerati Manor, provided you have brilliant ideas, rhythm in your hips, and $1 for we who are perennially disenfortuned. See, I would advise against involving yourself in that card game there. Bonhomme has been on a tear, and there's bound to be fisticuff once the fogs of inebriation has dispersed and his fellow gamblers discover how he's been fleecing them. Trust me, there's nothing messier than a gaggle of vengeful bohemians. Look, there's pig's feet and slaw and beans and rice and Hoppin' John in the kitchen there. Get it while it's hot and unmolested by the drunken chefs. You just missed Zora reading from her latest story, which was black enough, I suppose. That's her there. Bless her darling bosoms. It wasn't Jean Toomer, but what is? The niggerati must aspire. Still, Zora's quite a smash these days. The white critics can't get enough of her genius. Think of how they swoon if they could see her dance that bump. Shake your thing, Zora Neale. The dance, it's called the bump. You ought to give it a go. It's the closest thing to sex besides sex. Well, take your pick. Man, woman, a little bit of both if you're lucky. Langston Encounter will be along later with Helene, and I'm sure there will ensue an illuminating and interminable debate about the Negro art renaissance, after which I shall want to overdose on gin and throw myself out the window. Fine, I'm telling you, brother, this is it. Blood red cover design by Aaron Douglas, Zora Neale Hurston's play, Color Struck. Poetry by County Cullen. Helen Johnson, Langston Arnold, Louis Alexander, stories by Gwendolyn Benet, Zora, and of course, me. Fire. Oh yes, fire, devoted to younger Negro artists. Oh yes, we will put black men next to white men and women beside them both. And let the whole world bear witness. Look at this. Look at all of this. I am black, therefore I dance. Oh no, you don't, boy. You better step in line. It ain't for you to decide. You just better step in line, step in line. You are the messenger of deliverance. But I am Marcus Garvey. Crown me your king and we will conquer all of Africa. Follow me, oppressed and downtrodden black man. Give me your money and we will reclaim Africa for Africans. Follow me. Don't listen to him, my brothers. For I am William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. And I say to you this, you are a chosen generation. And we are a people in crisis, in crisis. You, artists, you must represent us. Cast aside your carelessness and carnal behaviors and represent the best of us. Show him and all of them, not who we are, but who we can be, and so shall we rise. Propaganda. Be this, think that, and oh yes, give us your precious art, but make it respectable. You see, speaking with one voice to advance the cause of the race. Rubbish. We have enough from governments, churches, and other gangs that would have us be other than what we are. But this This is a place where artists, and writers, and critics, and poets are finally published based on the quality of their work. 10 years old, I sat down, pencil in hand, leaning all the way forward in my two big, straight-backed chairs, swinging my feet, the air wheezing from my chest, turning and burning in my belly, but there was courage also that day. I forced the pencil to paper, and there etched the first word in big block letters, V. And I was king. They stormed out of me battles and adventures and fierceness of every kind. Upon review, one might say that perhaps one should refrain from review, but the very fact of putting it down on paper and the way the ideas in my head became solid, there was never such a feeling in all the world. To write. Fire, Lord, fire gonna burn my soul to create and try to do it well. That's all I expect of any creative person. And I think Negroes are as creative as any. I think we have something more to say than we should have been treated better. Of course, we should have been treated better. No, if the Negro writer is to make any contribution to American literature, he must prove himself to himself able to do distinguished work. Then it won't matter whether he is white or black. The talented among us will elevate themselves, free of the suspicion that he is celebrated simply because he proves himself to be a literate nigger or a proper peddler of the race. He will be what he is, beholden to none. I mean, good God, if we don't want to create something interesting and of quality, why not just write pornography? At least there's sex in that. Fire! Lasted one issue. And all the ballyhooing I've done. The New Republic, the Bookman, the Independent, the New York Evening Post, the New York Times, the New York World, even the Dance Magazine. After all, this one is my favorite. Well, this is a very articulate novel for a Negro. It has none of the decor or sensationalism of Nigger Heaven and Home to Harlem. It is a good novel, but would advise against publishing. Would not be a commercial success. However, we may consider it. Doubleday. Screw 'em. Ticket! He yells, swaying with the rolling train. I admire his sea legs before retrieving my ticket. It takes a second or two to find it. Ticket! As if I was deaf, thrusting a thick hand within inches of my nose, wriggling his dirty nailed fingers impatiently. Quick with you now, I ain't got all day. I'm looking! I shout back, pleased with myself for matching his volume. There. I cough at his hand before he can pull it away. Ha. Monkey chaser, he mutters, swaying again down the aisle. Ticket! Somewhere in eastern Nebraska, the landscape starts to mirror my mood. Rough, scrubby, and monochromatic. Even the sky is tinged in a dull brown. How do people live here? Opiates? I look down at the notebook lying open in my lap. Nonsense. I flip back a page, then 2 and 3. All I see are incoherent scribbles lurching against the slow rocking, the heavy train. What am I working on? I can't tell from what I've written. You've got to get some rest, says Dr. Dan, who is quite dashing, I must say. You need some air and light and rest. And for the love of God, stop drinking all that alcohol. If you're bent on killing yourself, there are better, quicker ways. Everyone's a dramatist. Another glance out the window. And confusion. The Midlands are flying by, charging toward the Rocky Mountains. Salt Lake City could be hours or minutes away. Have the train sped up? Maybe it'll do me some good. It may be that the mountain air will clear my head as it cleanses my chest. I was utterly unaware of how much energy is required to breathe and remain upright. The muscles that strain under a cough. I don't have enough time. Darling Bunny, how I wish you were here. I can hear you laughing, so stop it. It's a fine day in Salt Lake City. The sun is bright and warm, and I am draped scandalously over the whitewashed deck chair on Majak's whitewashed porch, pen in hand, thinking of you. It's true that I am at present near death. My lungs collapse and the darkness closes in even as I write. Perhaps it's allergies. At any rate, I long for you and the rest of the decadent harem. For now, however, I find the muse whispers ever so softly and apparently requires of the listener a state of devastating boredom and isolation. And so, Salt Lake City. And here I remain, swaddled and tucked, you naughty boy, with a T. Within these many walls, natural and supernatural. Mountains to the east and west, broad geometrically precise boulevards, the sky above as impossibly immense as the sprawling wild below. The critics raved about Black of the Berry, didn't they? Intra-racial prejudice. Has Thurman gone mad? We can't even get whites to accept us. What am I doing shining a light on our dark and naughty secrets? No, I am a boob and a masochist, and I should have written a love story starring two Black people of impeccable manners and extensive education. Boring. Harlem, the collaboration with William Jordan Rapp. Should I mention he was white? Open to raves on Broadway. Have you gone? Oh, speaking of Mormons, am nuts about the Joseph Smith project, also with Rapp. I think it'll be brilliant. I'm calling it Sultan Smith, and it takes place in Nauvoo, Illinois, where the Saints briefly encamped before being driven out and forced to Salt Lake. Nauvoo was where Smith received his vision authorizing polygamy. Anyway, that's the kernel of the play, and I have some delicious ideas for its development. It'll be entirely unusual and perhaps even good. I've gone bonkers over Smith's history, and I've even read the entire Book of Mormon. I'll let you know what progress is made. Don't tell anyone. So, do write back, won't you? Lanky, lanky, lank. Well, Louise and I are splits. Surely you've heard the scandal. She's alleged in her divorce decree, soliciting sex from some boy in a subway loo, as if anyone really does that anymore. No, instead of stating the truth, she shouts to everyone within hearing distance that I am an homosexual. No, Wallace, I don't want to hear it. Either it happened or it did not. And do not try to deny that it did. You went into that filthy place, and even if you weren't looking for it, you handed over your money to that man. Normal men do not do this. Normal men don't know how. Well, there are all sorts of allegations about our intimate relation. Hers and mine, not yours and mine. You wish. Which relations were fine, by the way, at least on my end. Believe it, mon chéri, for it is true. But Louise insists that I deceived her into believing I had great affection for her and valued her companionship. She says it's all a lie. And don't get her started on Bunny. Harold Stephenson, she says. A tall, white Canadian. What's to say? At any rate, she's ridiculously livid, and the divorce is bound to be an excruciating process. She's pledged to take every penny, past, present, and future in perpetuity, and as many pounds of flesh as she can tear away. I may have to commit suicide just to be rid of her. The worst 6-month mistake of my life. I leave Salt Lake in the morning for Reno. Reno, where I hope to get this divorce thing moving. Then we'll be in California until I finish the screenplays I promised. Hollywood's first Negro. I have no idea what the hell to do with that. P.S. Might you consider contributing to the Wallace Thurman Poverty Fund? I've sicked rap on the criminals producing Harlem for royalties on the second tour, but with Luis's impending assault on my person and the other outstanding debts, I'm as dry as a bone. Can you help? Loneliness does not become me. City Hospital on Welfare Island. They keep calling it the Renaissance, and I want them to tell me why. It has long been my understanding that a Renaissance connotes a renewed interest in a particular subject. Has there been interest in Negroes before and I missed it? I call this one Infants of the Spring. Perhaps I should have left it at that. Infants of the Spring, a novel by Wallace Thurman, followed by 216 blank pages and a sharp black period at the end. Maybe that would have been more satisfying for all who thought it was repertorial rather than fiction, badly written semi-non-fiction, or just plain bad. Oh my, but the Negroes were on the move, my friend. North, east, west, we were trying. Like all new Americans, trying to find and define who we were to ourselves as much as anyone else. Finally! And we celebrated that at the Manor. I like to think our wildness was an outward expression of the promise we saw on the horizon and the frustration that it wasn't happening fast enough. And we said as much through art, poetry, and drama. But it was also for us shelter, a place where we could let go and dance and talk and wonder, put aside the ridiculous weight of being a revolutionary. Nobody talks about how silly it is for young people to believe they can usher in an entirely new era. Really. Armageddon, perhaps, but an era. We were infants. Perhaps you know. Perhaps it has ever been so. From the first novel written in hard-pressed lettering of a 10-year-old to the melodramatic adaptations of films and poetry and stories about gypsies and hell and heaven and love and suicide and plays and novels and essays and even a musical, God help me. It is a certain kind of agony that sears the soul of an average man yearning. Who sees, what might be if he were just a little bit more? So I did want to write about Niggerati Manor. Yes, and who wouldn't? Believe me, plenty did, hangers-on and the protectors of the social welfare and what have you. But it was my home. They were my friends. It was my life, so why not me? I wanted to write about it, so I did. I wrote this one the same year. Intern is tangible proof that the universe is full of stars and dust and irony. I thought that by writing a novel set in a real place, I was exposing one of the greatest horrors in American healthcare right here in New York. Deplorable conditions, despicable staff, no care, whatever. City hospital on Welfare Island was a crime. If I'm ever placed here, I said, kill me. So there's a kind of sneering cosmic humor to the fact that I find myself in the very institution I excoriated. The very ward, in fact. It's not so bad. And if one is destined to drown in one's own fluids, it seems macabre to go under in too cheery of a place, don't you think? Maybe that's what they were saying. Death is ugly. You hate your own people, they say. You hate yourself. Who are you to claim to represent us? Who are you anyway, you black faggot? Who are you? Who are you? Maybe I ain't nothing but a tar-faced country boy with his black button eyes and big ideas. Skinny kid from Utah who talked something pretty but couldn't stand up when it came down to his own writing. We were going to change the world, you know. Not slowly or incrementally. We were going to take hold of one another and dance right through whatever barriers were out there to finally say, here we are. And we believed we could. Just across that river there, alone in some grubby nook with a pen or a palette in one hand and a scotch in the other, they're doing it. They're moving the wheels of the world. Lord, but there are some giants at work among us. I know them. I know them. I brought them round. I gathered them up and brought them here around the manor. Langston County, Bruce Nugent, Helen Johnson, Arnold Bontemps, Gwendolyn Benet, Zora Neale. So close I can hear them. We are all alone when we die, whether with everyone who has loved us or in a solitary cinder block room. I prefer it this way, actually. There's no use pretending, and besides, at 32, I'm not nearly as charming as I used to be. It's true, you know, what happens when death approaches. Suddenly there's no and too much time. And there's little for the brain to do but wonder about any number of impossibilities. What would have been different had I done one thing or another at that time or another? If I made more of an effort, could I have become more than the sum of my failings? I can hear Ma Jack now. What'd she say when I done something to warrant the saying? Boy, she'd say, what you care nothing for, you ain't gonna bother fix. See, what you don't love, seems to me, you don't much know nor care what becomes them. So I try not to think too much of all I have to regret. The Mormons believe that their most faithful and obedient disciples will themselves one day become gods. They've been scorned and abused for this belief that they may ascend and become what they now revere. But if one is to place one's beliefs in an omnipotent, I quite like the Mormon's chutzpah. Here are mine. Aristotle and Euripides, Shakespeare and Dickens, James and Wharton, Toomer and Hughes. My gods, all. I gathered them together there at the manor. And for that blink of time, it was rapture. One day, if I keep faith, perhaps I too will learn what it is to make manifest my own clarion call, to open my mouth and sing the notes I have written, and know that they are beautiful. And my friends, that will be There was, about 170 years before Christ, an African-American slave named Publius Terentius Afer, better known as Terence. Terence came to Rome by way of his master, Terentius Lucanus, a Roman senator who, contrary to the generally accepted norms of those who owned other people, recognized that his young captive possessed unusual ability, curiosity, and intelligence. He provided Terence with an education and later freedom. And young Terence went on to become a tremendously popular playwright. The scholar, Claudia Villa, estimated that from 800 AD, more than 600 manuscripts have been found to contain Terence's work. All 6 of his plays have survived. Some have called them pagan, which warms my heart. There is attributed to this Terence a statement. Homo sum humani nil eme aliniem puto. Paraphrased, I am a human being. Nothing that is human is alien to me. I am a human being. Whew. Fire, fire, Lord, fire is gonna burn my soul.
Geez, I'm so glad my camera is off because all my facial expressions and tears were too much. And I like read this play beforehand, so like none of it caught me by surprise, but that performance, like, oh my God, Carleton. The audience is just gonna have to put up with me just being in awe for a little bit. Please put fire emojis in the chat for Wallace Thurman real quick, for Carleton, for Jenifer Nii, for Jerry. We're gonna do the Q&A portion of this evening now. There is a Q&A little box. Feel free to drop all your questions. I, for one, am overflowing with them. I see that Jerry posted something, said a video I took 11 and a half years ago when we were preparing for this production on 267 West 136th Street in Harlem. So that's going to be a cool thing to check out if you want to see another version of this. I'm going to go ahead and start with my questions. Feel free to be dropping your questions in the chat. And I think this is going to be a question that I ask for everyone who is our panelists right now. But can you describe the research you did to write, perform, direct this play? I feel like there's so much meaty history here that I'm just kind of curious what your process were for starting to dig into this just stunning material.
Would you like me to start?
You know, it could really be anybody, but you're speaking now, Jenifer, so I think it's you.
Well, I guess I should say that my research started in a moment of panic after Jerry Rapier said, "Hey, what do you know about Wallace Thurman?" And I, as so often is the case when Jerry would approach me and say, "Hey, what do you know about?" I said, "Nothing." But what I found when I started doing research, and I read Wallace Thurman's collected writings, and I also tried to read as much from as many of his contemporaries as I could. I realized what a shame it was that that this wasn't part of the curriculum that already existed for students in not just in Utah, but in the West. So from there, I kind of went down a rabbit hole of what was happening during the Renaissance and also what was happening here in Utah during that period as well, because it was a really strange and wonderful and stranger time in Utah. As you can imagine, all of the issues at play were playing through the lens of this unique and wonderful culture that was growing up here in Utah. So rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and it was it kind of exploded my mind and my heart at the same time. So it was a true pleasure for me.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I never realized until you just said that, Jennifer, how often I have asked you that open-ended question. Which is great. I think I just happened to stumble on information about Wallace Thurman, and I had the same, just little blurbs. There's really not a lot about him. It's little pieces here and there. And I was shocked to discover that such a large figure within the Harlem Renaissance actually was born and raised in Salt Lake City. And that he was a student at the U of U, that, and then I started thinking about what it must have been like in this place that we live in, where we don't really talk about anything that we really think and feel. What the actual experience of being a person of color, particularly someone descended immediately, the next generation from slaves that were transported here across the plains, pulling hand carts, what that had to have been like, another thoughtless displacement for a means that had nothing to do with who they were as individuals. And I love that Jenifer mentions that in the play too, that why don't we know more about those folks and that experience and that journey. And also I just found it fascinating to think about the huge footprint that Wallace Thurman had in a very short life, in a time when it was really difficult to have a footprint at all, much less one of that size. And the other thing that I really love, that I think Carleton's performance in 2010 and this evening again really captured, and Jen's text really captures, is how the Harlem Renaissance was so self-critical that there was as much celebration as there was mockery of what they were celebrating. And I think that's something that we don't get as much now, to be self-reflective and self-critical and not take ourselves too seriously, even though sometimes, I mean, the stakes were so much higher for those folks in that time and than we can possibly imagine. Anyway, now I'm rambling. I'm done.
Your mic's off.
Did you want me to say something on that?
If you got something to add it.
I was just really quick. I just you know, when I first was asked to do this, I was obviously scared out of my mind. But I hadn't known who Wallace Thurman was, and through the research and learning about him, especially through this play, the thing that struck me the most was how similar we were in the fact that he wanted to create. You know, he just wanted to create, and in a big way. His dreams were huge and big, and for him and his people, and he never really got to. I mean, he died at 32. You know, like he never really got to come into himself, I think. So it's an interesting thing, that line about you know, realizing when you're young, you know, that you're like trying to like start a revolution, you're all fired up, you know. It's interesting reading this play again, going back and being like, oh yeah, I felt like that a lot more when I was younger. Anyway, that's all.
I feel like a lot of young creatives can probably relate to that. And to echo something that's already been said, yes, why this isn't taught more. That's something that we've gotten a lot on social media posts as we've been promoting this event too. People just being like, what? We didn't know that we had this tremendous figure as a part of Utah and American West's history. which is part of the reason, like when I found out, I probably learned about Wallace Thurman 2 years ago at the Pride Center at Utah. And I was angry and shocked just because, you know, I'm a poet from Utah, have done a lot of research, and it was just infuriating that, like, why was this kept from me? I'm rambling now too. I'm on the same boat Jerry is on. Which leads me to kind of this next question, and y'all have kind of alluded to it already. But how did people respond to Thurman in his time? I feel like a lot of figures from the Harlem Renaissance that were taught are like Langston Hughes. And then if you're lucky, you get a little bit more Langston Hughes. And then, of course, Nora Zeal Hurston. And the story that's always told about her is that she had to be rescued by Alice Walker from, like, the archives, Nora died, that she's died penniless. And that's a huge part of, yes, her story, and how she's celebrated now isn't how she was celebrated then. So the crux of that question is, yes, how did people respond to Thurman in his time? We got a bit of that through the play, but I was wondering if we can get it a little plain spoken directly from y'all right now.
I feel like there were moments of appreciation, but for the most part, my sense was that he came under quite a bit of criticism, because he wrote about topics that, how do I say this? He wrote about issues within the Black community, tensions within the Black community at a time when so many outspoken voices were calling for presentation of a community that I felt like Thurman struggled with, because he believed the community was stronger when it was honest, is what I want to was my thought, and that too much of what he was seeing was polished and was playing very, very well to certain segments of the white community, and I feel like that hurt him in a way, but at the same time, I think that I got the sense that he struggled wanting his work to be better, you know, to be poetic in a Hughes kind of way, that he never quite got there, and that he felt it and that it hurt. And so some of his collaborations, the play that was on Broadway was well received, but his solo work, his novels struggled, as I think did he.
That was really well said, especially the stronger when honest. I feel like that's getting at the heart of a lot of that. Was there anything y'all wanted to add? I don't want to, like, poke an answer out of each of you, but, like, if you wanted to say something, I also didn't want to cut the mic, you know, doing that moderator thing. Okay. So the publication of Fire only lasted one issue, and it included some of the best names of its time, but it ultimately seems like a failed project. So I guess when we're thinking back of Fire, why is it important? And it's the name of what you chose to name this play. So I'm curious, yes, like, why did you make that choice?
One of the things that I really loved about Fire was that it emerged at a time and in a place, at this manor, this physical place, that brought together all of these amazing, creative, expansive, rebellious sort of souls that were stretching, many souls that were just stretching. And this magazine gathered them together. So it, in my mind, one of the reasons why it was significant to me was that it was a physical representation, including the contributions and the heart of this community that was physically gathered together. And they spoke in that moment, in that place, they spoke together. And to me, that just, it was heartbreaking that it didn't last, but it was beautiful that it happened.
I don't think we can, it's hard for me to fathom the pace at which they were creating work. It's very much, it was a collective. This brownstone in Harlem, where all of these literary figures were hanging out together, living together at times, sleeping together at times, but mostly creating. And it fostered this incredible combustible environment. And I don't think that it was so much, I think part of it was they were on to the next thing as well. Like so much was bursting out that, oh, we did this, now let's do this, let's do this. Because if you really look at his collective works, Thurman alone, his in 8 years of, actually 7 years in New York, he created more than what most people would create in a career. I wanted to mention too that there is a really great film that launched Anthony Mackie's career, and it was published, it was released in 2004, called Brother to Brother, and it's the only thing I've ever seen in that medium that portrays Wallace Thurman, and it's this contemporary character looking back at what I'm trying to, he inserts himself into this history that is his own, but he doesn't know exists until the film begins. It's really interesting. You can stream it on just about anything now.
Ooh, thank you, Jerry, Jenifer, both of you. Thank you so much. It's so full of knowledge about this. And if you missed it in the chat, there's a JPEG of the cover of the one and only issue of Fire. So that's a real piece of historical memorabilia that you don't want to miss out on. Did you want to add anything, Carlo? Okay, cool. So this one's for everybody, but what did you like most about Thurman?
I think Carleton has to go first. I vote Carleton.
It's all passion. It's all passion. Yeah. I think that he wasn't afraid to say what he wanted to say. Whether it was liked or not, he did it. I think that's one of the things that I'm learning, to be brave. And that line towards the end about to make manifest your own clarion call, to have a voice and to use it. This guy used it. I love that.
My favorite line in the whole play is when he's referring to Brigham Young. I love that crazy dude. But I love how you use that in the play, Jenifer, and how you played that moment, Carleton, that it didn't seem like Wallace Thurman felt inferior or lesser than to the subjects that he wanted to tackle. And so the reading of the Book of Mormon as research to write a play about Sultan Smith is, I think, pretty telling as well, that he wasn't, a conversion story wasn't coming down the pike for Wallace Thurman in Salt Lake City in the early 1900s.
Did Sultan Smith ever get published, or is that like, oh, that would have been so good?
there's so many fragments of stuff. He also had an incomplete piece called Black Cinderella that nobody can find. But there's a couple of references to it in other writings of other people at the time. And it had to have been better than the current hot mess on Amazon Prime. I mean, I'm just saying.
Jenifer, did you want to add anything?
No. No.
The next question is, what was your least favorite thing about Thurman? We just got
that was a tough one. That's a tough one to answer, because I didn't find anything that made me go, oh, yikes. But one of the things that I really, this was a man who had baggage, heavy baggage, and was messy and flawed, and I rather than finding some of his messiness to be like, oh, it made me want to know him. It made me want to sit down with him and say, hey, tell me about you, you know? So nothing comes to mind that I dislike, but I was really, I was really struck with all that he carried, you know, with him, because it was a lot. It was a lot.
I feel like that facial expression says it from Carleton, like, just nah. Did you want to add something, Jerry? Your mouth is like half open.
The things I'm thinking about, I can't think of anything that, mostly that he didn't live long enough for us to know more about, experience more of his work. I'm mostly thinking about little trivia things that are popping into my head that I haven't remembered in a long time, like that his grandmother that he lived with was a founding member of the Calvary Baptist Church.
Oh, wow. That's gigantic.
That he bounced around a lot as a kid, and she ran a saloon out of her home, which was kind of the root of his alcoholism, but which we haven't really talked about here. And also, I didn't really connect this until just now, even though I knew this. I'll just talk about the flu pandemic of 1918. That's when he first got sick. He missed some school because he was sick with the flu. So he finished high school actually later than he should have because of how sick he was. But he did obviously survive that pandemic.
Yeah, and well, what a striking parallel for our own times as well. The question I'm going to end on us on, by the way, the audience dropped 0 questions in the chat. Only 2 people left, so they were definitely captivated by what y'all were saying. But if this was a college class, I'd be like, but it's not. So I'm like, I just love that y'all are here. The last question that I want to ask, and I do hope that I get a response from all of you, just because I think it's something crucial, is why do you think Wallace Thurman's story is important for Utah today? Especially thinking about everything our state and our country is kind of going through right now.
Well, of the 3, I've lived here the least percentage of my life of the 3 of us, and I'm constantly surprised at the erasure of people of color in the history of this state and how rich that history is, and for that alone. That he's a significant literary figure in global literature, in national literature, and should be seen as such and recognized as such in our state. And that's where he has the least visibility.
I'll just say representation. You know, I think that I'm super proud that I grew up in Utah. My parents. I mean, I love my parents and my family and my life that I've had there, and the way that I am because of it. And you know, when I first did this play, I was so shocked that I was reading about someone who was exactly like me, from the place that I was from. And you know, I've always I don't know, I've always felt, I used to always feel a little bit like an outsider in every aspect. You know, being in Utah where there's less than 2% of us, and it's definitely mostly white people, you know, but then like growing up there and going somewhere that's predominantly Black and speaking the way I do and acting the way I do, I always felt a little bit out of pocket. And I think that seeing that this person also was very out of pocket, openly out of pocket, and was also a very important figure to the Harlem Renaissance, which is huge for us and African Americans, made me, it just gave me solace, man, and hope, like, oh man, like there were people like me, and I am people like me, and there hopefully will be people like me, and let's continue to support those people and their artistic endeavors and get that voice out there. It's so important. There might not be many of us in Utah, man, but for those of us that are here, you know, this is so huge. It's so important. We're all, regardless of how things turn out, we're all together as a tribe, as a people, and hopefully that tribe continues to grow, and hopefully this helps somehow. That's all.
Anything to add, Jenifer?
The thought that comes to mind is that I think that the more that we know about how diverse our communities are and have been, the more we can start to see one another as community. I think that if we only see part of us, if we only see part of us, the part that doesn't get seen, this is, I mean, it's so obvious, but the part of us that doesn't get seen suffers. And I think that the power that we can find in seeing more and seeing deeper and seeing more diversity is where art can really play a part in helping people see. And I think that Thurman tried to do that, and I think that was what was behind Jerry's idea to explore his life, was just to say, look, look at us, because Thurman is part of us, and when we know him, we are better, and when we know him, we see more deeply, and so I'm going to stop talking now, but
yeah, and I just like a lot of finger snaps to everything y'all had just said. And especially as this event is a part of Welcoming Week, I want to throw in my own 2 cents about riffing off of what Carleton was saying about the importance of seeing like somebody like you, but like I'm thinking to parallel my own life as being like a child of Salvadoran refugees. Growing up in Utah, like, oh my gosh, like you become so much weirder than all the other like Salvadoran community, like by itself. Like my tongue was like a mix of LDS Spanish, reggaeton, the Puerto Ricans I grew up with in New Jersey, like the trying to explain what I had become was so like difficult to other like Latino communities. And it wasn't until I discovered Marcos Mitic Villatoro, who's a Salvadoran writer who's also Appalachian, and speaks with a country drawl and writes with one and mixes it into his Spanish, that I finally was like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't need to be like the rest of my kind. Like, I can be this Utah version of me. And I feel like, yeah, Wallace does that in a big way for a lot of POC communities in Utah. The way Jenifer's response was going was actually tying close to this question that we just got in the chat. I'm so excited. Because I feel like so much of this piece and so much of the Harlem Renaissance is about literature and activism, right? Like a lot of POC literary movements have this at their core, whether you're talking about the Black Arts Movement, La Generación Comprometida in Central America. There's this like tension between those two, between the activism and the literature. And in some literatures, it's very hard to divorce those two and would probably be just a bad move to even try. The question is, what is more vulnerable in an artist's life, using a voice, activism, or cultivating one's singular voice? I have no idea how I would respond to that, so good luck, y'all.
Well, okay, so as Jerry can tell you, to me, I think they're equally as vulnerable.
Yeah.
In a very high stakes way. So I have a play that Plan B is producing in February that is using my voice as far as activism goes, and is also my singular voice. And it's an insanely scary thing. I have no idea how anyone's going to take it. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to be received, but it is very, very much me. It is very much my opinion of things. So what's more vulnerable? This is the first time I've actually ever really used my voice in an activism sort of way as an artist. So I can just tell you that it's scary.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure which one is more, but it's especially in this climate, especially in Utah. I think it's going to be pretty harrowing. But I'm excited for it.
That harrowing sort of excitement, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, all the stress of releasing a creative work out into the world with the added just complications and challenges of activism. Having done like activism in various communities, there's criticisms come from all angles. And of folks who are, trying to do their best just to serve and improve the world. So that's something that I don't think should be taken lightly. It's gigantic of a contribution for somebody to try to make.
I agree with Carleton. I think they're pretty equal, and you bounce back and forth between the two. And I think as I work with writers and try and support what they're trying to say, the magical moment occurs when it shifts from personal narrative to a character-driven piece of theater. that it becomes literature then. And then it allows the writer to step back and be more objective about what the characters in the play need to say and experience versus what they may have or may need to. And that's really, truly what I live for. It's to see that moment happen. And I've seen that now twice with Carleton and many times with Jenifer. And generally, if you try and if people try and create a play of the moment, it feels like you're trying to force a moment within a moment. But if you write from a truthful personal place that creates a truthful personal character, then it feels universal. This play felt incredibly specific in 2010, but my God, it feels like Jenifer wrote it earlier today for this moment, this evening. You know, it feels urgent now, but I think that's because she wrote it with that separate but specific and yet unified intent of merging personal and the character driven.
Very well described, Jerry. Did you want to add anything, Jenifer?
I guess the only thing that I'd add is, well, firstly, there's a reason why I don't act, because I can't put Carleton showed today that there's a power in that act that I just don't have, and part of it is because Carleton is brave in a way that I can't be. It seems, you know, he steps up, and as you saw today, embodies. And so for me, I approached, Jerry has given me the opportunity to write about a number of really interesting subjects. We talked earlier this year about polygamy, and then with this play, the challenge for me is to find the personal within the scope of this really interesting world, or this really interesting question, to find that which is that speaks to me as a personal question, and to see what I can do dramatically to give that question bones and skin and blood and a heart. But there's no way that I could step up in the way that you just saw Carleton do. That level of vulnerability is just, well, in this case in particular, Carleton is just,
Yeah.
you know, he's that guy. and so that level of vulnerability only comes from that level of strength.